It is a complete commitment to the bit. It is a complete commitment to what it's selling. It doesn't matter how excessive it may seem. It doesn't matter how stupid its lore and setting sometimes seems. It doesn't matter how ridiculously survivable its protagonist is. Modern action films often feel embarrassed by their world and their lore, feeling the need to cram in as much comedy as possible and constantly winking at the audience. Look at the MCU. Look at the lead writer for Netflix's Witcher series coming out against the books that she's fucking adapting. Look at this new Dungeons and Dragons movie where they hired the directors of the comedy film Game Night to laugh and snicker their way all the way to the silver screen. None of it is taken seriously. And that is why John Wick succeeds. It is complete commitment, it is excessive, it is ridiculous, and you take it all incredibly seriously because the movie takes it seriously. And I loved this movie. Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt and that is Chuck, and this is episode number 1. That's right, folks, we've got a new name, new day of the week, a reinvigorated gusto, but it's the same old show. We're talking all things theater and stream. We've got the industry news you care about. We're talking about all the things that we watched this week in the watch list. We've got a non-film recommendation with the Mentionable. And we're picking the one thing and the one thing only that you should watch with the pick of the week. But that's not all. We're wrapping up this nice little package around a featured review of John Wick Chapter 4. And let me tell you, there's no better film to kick off our newly minted show. If you don't know the story behind our name change, I'll direct you to a video that we published on our channel last week, because I'm not going to repeat it here. Henceforth, we are moving forward. Now, Chuck, for anybody that's jumping on board now or is looking for our mission statement, who are we and what do we stand for here at Theater and Stream?
Well, Matt, in short, we are two film snobs from the upper Midwest, and, we're hobbyists first and foremost. We're not here to make a buck. We're not here to shill a Patreon or a meal kit or, razors. But in this day and age, it's probably more than likely like human growth hormone, like testosterone replacement therapy treatments. Yeah, I think that's what's in these days. But yeah, we're also not here to just give you whatever, a corporation wants you to hear. Oftentimes we will not like the things that we watch, even though we, like Matt likes to say, we don't like to watch shit. So, because that's kind of the point. Like, there's so much swirling out there, in this marketplace. You have a streaming ecosystem, you have a theater environment that is gasping for air, and it's hard to know what is worth your time in either space. And we are doing the grunt work. We are putting our money, where it counts. We are spending the money on the streaming subscriptions. We are buying these tickets at AMC's surge prices because we know that you want us to know, should I even go to my local AMC? Should I go to my local theater or multiplex and watch a movie when I can stay and watch it in the comfort of my own home? There's a give and take. It cuts both ways. And I feel like there's just not enough actually being said about which version of the cinematic experience is worth it. And if we're going to, explore anything on this show, it is unpacking that question and trying to make sure that you aren't wasting your money, because we are, in a sense, because we are the ones who are paying for Netflix and all the crap that they put out. But I think that kind of does it. I think it's time to talk about the news. This initial one is, in line with that very thought. And that's why I included this. I'm a big fan of the YouTuber Films at Home, because he put out a video basically saying, hey, if you only have seen All Quiet on the Western Front on Netflix, you're fucking up, because apparently the 4K of this is so spectacular, and the side-by-side comparisons of the two, is pretty stark. And I would recommend that you just go and watch his video about that. But I guess, is that a larger point that I guess the whole industry maybe should consider? Is streaming really not as successful at giving a pristine and clarified version of a piece of art, or is it just the most convenient and digestible way to do it?
Yeah, I mean, there's too many things that can go wrong with streaming. Like you have like these terrible glitchy apps. If you have like even for a second subpar internet connection, you start seeing all this grain and all this like these artifacts where the blacks look almost gray and it's like glitching out almost. And there's just too much that can go wrong with streaming movies. And I've always been a big proponent of physical media. I buy 4K Blu-rays for any movies that I think are worth it, and I probably will for this movie. And I do think that a lot of times you are getting a subpar version of these films. But then again, we live in a age where people are probably watching these movies on their fucking phone. So, I mean, do people actually care? Do most people actually care? Probably not. I mean, can you imagine watching John Wick Chapter 4 on your phone in like 6 months? Oh. I'm sure a lot of people are going to do that.
It's agony, but like, what is it, almost like 13, 14 years ago, I remember seeing Avatar in a theater, being and blown away like everybody else, and then seeing an ad for a Samsung phone that came with Avatar preloaded on it. And just like how that was the hype, and I'm sitting there like, but can you even see it? Because you're talking about a smartphone in the year 2010 at the time. It's like there's no way it conceivably could give you anything as close to what the genuine article would be. We can't be so precious, I guess, because people do just will just watch what they want to watch, how they can watch it. And that is, just how it's going to be. And in keeping with that, how things are just going to have to be, is that, people can be bullshit artists and still, wind up, getting bought by, a major studio or a streaming platform. Because I guess I was totally, I had no clue that this was a thing. You always hear, oh yeah, some guy created chicken nuggets and he never got any money for it. And it's like, okay, maybe that's the case. But now that there's an entire movie out of where Flamin Hot Cheetos came from. And there's a controversy. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so for people that don't know the story, this guy named Richard Montanez, he about a decade ago started going around talking about how he was the inventor of the Flamin Hot Cheetos for Frito-Lay. And he started saying this story so much that he actually became almost like a public speaker, and he would go around to schools and corporate functions and do speeches about his success story, about how he was a janitor at Frito-Lay and he worked his way up the company and by inventing these Flamin' Hot Cheetos. And apparently he charges anywhere between $10,000 and $50,000 to do one of these speaking engagements. And in
That's
2021,
good fake business right there.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, he's making bank, and he has a book deal now with Penguin Random House to tell his story, and of course he has this movie coming out now that is directed by Ava Longoria. I believe it's starring Matt Walsh is in there, and Dennis Haysbert is in the movie, I believe. But in 2021, when this movie was announced, the LA Times did a really, really scathing expose, basically saying that this guy is lying, and nothing he said is true. They interviewed a dozen other Frito-Lay employees, and the company itself released a statement that was basically like, well, we support Richard's success. His version of the events are urban legend, essentially.
Wow.
And it's
So that's a fascinating story in and of itself. That's the movie. Like that,
Yeah.
but that's the thing. Like we're getting this movie produced by Eva Longoria that is going to be providing us the lie. Like the urban legend is going to be put out like truth, and they're going to like act like it. They have to act like it is true, despite having, because that expose from the Los Angeles Times is excellent journalism. It is so in depth. It is worth the read. And yeah, this is just such a bizarre story. But to me, the real story is the movie. Like, how do you just inhabit this lie for so long, you know, and then manifest it into reality, and then have people openly be like, well, yeah, it's all bullshit, but we're still gonna like let you make hundreds of thousands of dollars as a, you know, a paid speaker, like he's Hillary Clinton or something like that. It's really bizarre, and I want to see that story.
Yeah, you know, that would have been the smart thing to do. But what they're doing instead is, you know, of course, Eva Longoria is a Latina, and they are pitching this movie as a Latino success story. You know, a guy that worked his way up from nothing into something, and that's what I've heard. You know, people who have seen this movie now at the South by Southwest premiere last week are saying that's essentially what it is. It's basically, it's her pitch for sort of this guy who went from nothing to something, and so she's selling the bullshit, and
yeah, very, very well.
You know, yeah, people are not, you know, taking it sitting down, I guess. But the one thing I wanted to know about this movie, I did some research beforehand. I'm like, you know, who's behind this other than her, of course? Who are these bullshit artists that are behind this movie? And I didn't have to look any further than the movie's producers. And when I looked at them, you know, of course, this movie involves religious film grifters, because the two producers on this movie are David Kern, who is the producer of the faith-based movies Breakthrough, The Star, and Miracles from Heaven.
No!
And then, yeah, and the other guy is Samuel Rodriguez, who did the Christian faith-based movies My Brother's Crossing and Breakthrough. And so that's the people behind this movie. So, I mean, add that to the pile. You have these guys who purport to be Christians to sort of shill the Christian ideology on your silver screen, and they're involved with this. Like they're the bullshit artists, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, these are the dudes who produce the movies that your local Lutheran church will like host a screening for, and it'll be like the major world premiere of this big Hollywood movie. You're like, and your local community will feel spicy for a second, and then you realize what it's actually for. Yeah, like Fireproof is another, like Facing the Giants was like the OG of those. Yeah. My family got that on DVD. You better believe that. God, their involvement just makes it even more perfect. And yeah, we'll leave it there. But like I said, I just want someone to like hack the movie up and then like insert like all the facts over top of it, kind of like it's like pop-up video. That's an idea. Steal that, internet. Go run with that idea for a YouTube show. But you had a really, really interesting little brain pan of a moment in the doc, and we realized there was an intersection between some things that we were gonna, include. Because on my local, Facebook rant page, I assume that other communities have these things, or maybe you guys just use Nextdoor or whatever it's called. But on My Not Whiners and Complainers 2.0, some lady popped up and she was just like, I am angry. I have been exposed to drunk cats, and I won't be having it anymore, and America needs to be ready to purge the sinners and unbelievers. I don't know. She goes crazy. The text is up there. You can join the page yourself if you want to see all the spicy comments, because there were a lot. But I just saw this and I blew my top. I just couldn't believe it was real. But this is the community I live in. This is North Dakota. But how did you through line this to the topic of, how can art survive in a modern world like this? It's like, if we can't even have Puss in Boots, what can we have?
Yeah, so the sort of title of this sort of segment is the reception of art in modernity, and we're taking this at a micro and macro level. And so Chuck has already sort of illustrated the micro level. And on the macro level, what we're seeing in the last week or so is sort of people in the film industry, people in the film community that are sort of waking up to the fact that, hey, maybe we don't take art the best way in, the current day. Maybe we need to, it's not healthy to, call for people's deaths on Twitter when we don't like a movie, or to dox people, or to say you're going to kill someone's children, or, maybe we don't take it so well and take art so well in modernity. And so there's two other stories that kind of intersect with this idea, and that is at South by Southwest, Julia Durkanow, however you say her last name, the film director of Titane, was doing a panel where she basically was asked about the state of the film industry, as far as these conversations people are having about the death of theaters. And she took the question in a completely different direction and basically said, I'm not so much concerned about the death of theaters. I am concerned about being canceled, because of the movies that I make. And people seem to think that the movies I make are a reflection of me in real life, and they think that I want to fuck your car for some reason, and I don't, and I don't want to eat you either. And she's really concerned about the idea of just the art that you make could cancel you as a person nowadays. And I don't know. Do you want to take it from here? What did you think of this?
On the one hand, I'm proud of her for coming out and saying this, because she is just the dommy mommy of transgressive filmmakers, of any stripe. The Titane was one of my favorite movies from that year, and she is just such a iconoclast. You don't expect her to be the person making the movies she makes, but she's pushing a lot of buttons, and she's transgressing a lot of orthodoxies, across the whole political compass, the whole ideological compass. The whole stew of reactionaries is set off by the art of this individual. So I get she's why she's reacting the way she is. Because what kind of movies can she make if she is literally going to be thinking about, who's going to be coming for my throat today? Because it could be anyone. Look at J.K. Rowling, for crying out loud. There was a full court press movement to try and suppress a video game, all because it maybe would give some money to someone who holds an opinion different from a lot of different people. Yeah, and that's another aspect of this. But it's sad that we're in this place, because either we act like it's a bad thing for terrorists to stab a bunch of cartoonists to death for drawing the Prophet Muhammad, or we are able to rationalize the murder and deplatforming, or whatever bad thing that people are calling for something as benign as not liking a Star Wars movie enough, or not letting the director we like make the movie we want them to make. The Snyderverse is a problem. Toxic fandom in general is a problem, and it's unfortunate that we are at the point now where a lot of these people, artists, and even in particular critics, are getting the vibe that I should just get the fuck out of here before they really start putting people against the wall. Because I've been listening to A.O. Scott since he was on At the Movies back in the day. He was one of the guest hosts, and he was always a voice I respected, even though I totally found his point of view to be different from mine. But to hear him basically just come out and say that I've had enough, these people are psychos, I think that says a lot. Culture needs to reassess, but we're not going to do that. Like, there's an election year looming, and we're all about to be deranged completely by every cultural force that we tap into. It's just reality. Mm-hmm. It's like, we're fucked.
So for just to continue along with the A.O. Scott thing, A.O. Scott announced his retirement from film reviewing this week, and in his sort of exit interview that was published to the New York Times website, he answered the question about, you know, what he likes and dislikes about movies, and you get the sense that his answer to this question was probably one of the reasons why he decided to get out of Dodge now. And it was essentially about how, you know, he has pissed off so many like subgroups of fans in the last like decade or so, ever since fandom has really gotten out of control. Everything Everywhere All at Once fans, Top Gun Maverick fans, MCU fans, DC Universe fans, and they all essentially came for his head at one time or another and tried to, you know, get him fired or threatened his life or, you know, whatever. And yes, Samuel L. Jackson even partook in the Avengers when he did something as like banal as post a subpar Avengers 1 review back in 2012 or whenever that was. And
that was not the movie to you know, go to the mattresses for, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was the Avengers. That movie was awesome at the time, but come on. Art in modernity, it's withering. You know, it's you know, we have a deleterious effect on, you know, art and culture these days. Everything is, you know, is getting pushed towards homogeneity in one direction, unfortunately.
And then the last thing I kind of wanted to say about, you know, just speaking about these three stories, these three sub-stories as a whole is, you know, it's, you know, next time you think about posting that tweet that is complaining about a director and then tagging that director in that tweet, you know, maybe think twice, people. You know, do you really have to do that? Because we have to get out of this mindset that it's not enough for us to be confident in our own opinions nowadays, but we must convince everybody else that that opinion is the correct one. And, you know, a lot of people nowadays are, if I agree with somebody on 9 out of 10 topics, 9 out of 10 subjects, but then that 1 out of 10 thing that we disagree on, that's enough for so many people nowadays to just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, nope, we disagree on that. Fuck you. I fucking hate you now. I don't like you. You are a bad person. And we have to let people have different opinions from us nowadays and come to a consensus on those 9 out of 10 things that we agreed on in the first place. So
it's very magnanimous of you, Matt, and it's very big of you. I don't know why it's so hard for this world to just accept something so simple as a concept as tolerance. Because how else can we live? You know, and speaking of something that is probably ripe for cancellation, it is Swarm. We have this in here again because in our, you know, final episode of our former iteration, I fucked up the audio and I left in the trailer audio, so you couldn't hear all the glowing, wonderful things we had to say about this. Did you finish watching it?
You know, unfortunately, I did not.
Okay.
I've only since seen one more episode since last week. So.
Well, it gets very, very weird. But I think what I appreciate about this show and its fullness, without spoiling anything, is its willingness to make each episode distinctive, not only in its subject matter, but in like what it's getting out of it. There are some episodes that are like deliberately entirely unlike the other episodes that came before it, or, you know, like that follow it, and it serves the whole thing because it makes the whole thing feel very interesting. But if I had a comment about this, other than reiterate enthusiastically watch this show. It is so good. Is that by the end, it is very clear that they are totally, butchering like another form of toxic fan culture here. But it's just, people whose whole lives are defined by the parasocial relationship. And nothing indicts that whole dynamic more than this, particular series. There's a lot of great actors who show up in this. Like Poot shows up in a strip club just for one scene. Poot from The Wire. But yeah, very memorable, very distinctive. And I just wonder if it wouldn't maybe have been just as well as a movie. Did it really need to be a 8-hour long series? Like, couldn't this have just been chopped up into its constituent parts? Because this was a better version of, God, what was that? The fucking cannibal movie from last year.
Bones and All.
Bones and All. This is just as good as Bones and All, if not better. And it's exploring something similar, in terms of just the kind of movie that it is. It's a road movie about serial killers, but there's a wholesome heart in it. You just see the broken person trying to find love and acceptance, and I just appreciated it a lot, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it's you'd asked about the length and whether or not it should have been a movie. I think that the sort of 30-minute episodes are a lot easier to digest. And I feel like if it would have been a movie, it would have felt too disjointed, because how you had said basically that every episode is so different. That's and it's true. So wildly crazy. So I think that it's much easier to digest in this format. I find that I can really only watch 1 or 2 episodes of this show at a time. Yeah. And so, but yeah, I'll echo everything you said. I do think it is a really, really good show. It's very unique. I mean, it's so weird. And again, I'll say what I said last week, in that I don't think it's quite as deep as people want it to be. No. I think it really is just a slasher film, but with maybe a little more frilly edges to it. The one thing that I picked up on in the last couple episodes that I watched between 2 weeks ago and this week, is sort of what he is saying, what Donald Glover is saying about sort of the visibility of black women in modern society, as far as she's doing all this heinous shit and everybody's just either not paying attention to her or becoming her best friend. You have that guy at the gym in LA, and he doesn't even know her, and he pretends like he knows her, and then he starts calling the receptionist a racist at the front desk. And then the only person in this show, at least what I've seen so far, that really seems to pick up on her bullshit is Billie Eilish's character. And everybody else is just kind of come be my best friend, come to my house, come on. And so I think that's pretty funny.
No, it is. It's very funny, and that underpins her success as a serial killer in the story. And I will say that there is a very fun episode that really sticks out like a sore thumb, but in a good way. And it's where it stops being the show and it turns into a true crime documentary investigating her. So look forward to that episode in the future. Okay. HBO also delivered something that I've been meaning to watch for a while. And it's a documentary about the photographer and activist Nan Goldin, directed by Laura Poitras, the queen of investigative journalism. Here she is just doing a trite, rote little biopic documentary. Because and that's the thing, there's two halves to this experience. You have the polemic film against the Sackler family and OxyContin. And then you have the documentary exploring the life and career of Nan Goldin. And one of them is a hell of a lot more interesting than the other, to me. And I would have much rather have gotten the front-loaded archival footage and all of the showcases of her little art projects, the slideshows that she would create. But because she is such a sainted figure, there isn't a lot of, I don't know if you know a lot about her, but a lot of her work is about focusing in on the the underground deviant communities of New York in like the 70s and the 80s and 90s. So like the gays and the druggies and the hookers and everything. And a lot of what she did was revelatory because it exposed, the lives of people who weren't being seen. But there's a hint of exploitation to her whole career. And once that kind of goes, like it's put out there, but it's not acknowledged deeply enough or with enough substance, to actually like sting and like put any like, pain, or any questioning within herself when she's being spoken to. Because in the modern day, all she fucking cares about is taking care of the Sacklers and making sure their name is off of every museum that they've invested money into, or donated money to, rather. Because that's the arc of the documentary. They only really become compelling when you realize that she's just trying to, stave off cancel culture in her own right. Kind of like Lydia Tarr, she is a someone who is pretty, high up within the standings of New York art, people. She has a lot of cred, but she also knows that you have to make sure that you can't be brought low. And right now, she could realistically be brought low if people would apply modern sensibilities to how she built herself into who she is. So it's interesting on that level. But I feel like Poitras has been pulling her punches since she did Citizen 4. She got that Oscar, and she started fucking the subject of her last documentary, Risk. Like, she's like one of the dudes, not Julian Assange. She was fucking the other guy. And then in this, she's focusing on someone she respects deeply and was probably inspired by. And so I feel like she should be hitting harder for, somebody, with the stature that she herself has. But all the same, worth watching if you have HBO and want to have an inside look at some fascinating, people, and, there's some recent and, former history.
Is this, I just a question about, as I'm watching the clips here, this strikes me as a documentary that doesn't necessarily have like the most visible through line. Like it seems very,
Exactly.
it seems like very vague. It seems like it doesn't have much narrative to it. Is that correct? Is it just kind of like a collection of photos and video clips and stuff like that?
Yeah, and the narrative thrust is all the activism, all the protesting, and whether or not they're succeeding in getting museums and whatnot to take the Sackler name off of the wing that they paid for. And so, and I believe that is something they succeeded at, even like all the way to the Guggenheim and the Met and all that stuff. So like that's the thing that they're following. It's like the victory comes, eventually, but it's layered around her career. But it doesn't quite get compelling for me to see who she was versus who she is today. What wasn't compelling was the lack of interest in actually taking that through line between everything. Because either you're treating all the past like fluff, or you're trying to use it to inform the present. And I'm sorry to invoke Warhammer right now, but the two-headed eagle in Warhammer 40k, like one is looking to the future with its eyes open, and one is looking to the past with its eyes closed. It's one of those situations.
Okay.
So Nan Golding is like the Imperium of Man. And this next thing on the watch list here, I meant to watch it just because it looked interesting. It's funny that so much of what we're talking about today is running along this theme of like old school attitudes and modern mores, and cancel culture, because that's what Lucky Hank is about. From what I gather.
Yeah, definitely. New AMC show with Bob Odenkirk, and this is the adaptation of a novel called The Straight Man, and Bob Odenkirk plays a chair for an English department at an underfunded college who essentially has sort of reached his breaking point as far as how mundane his life is, how he's essentially having a midlife crisis. And this show is weird because I would say this is the closest thing AMC has ever made to a sitcom.
Okay.
But it's not really that funny, even though it does try to be. And it's saying some things that are pretty interesting. You know, it's pretty scathing about like modern institutions like universities. And it does have some interesting stuff to say, but the whole thing is rather mundane and boring, and it's trying to be. But I don't know. I come from the school of thought that just because you acknowledge that something is mundane doesn't mean that it's good. Like, it still is mundane, it still is boring, it still isn't very interesting. And that's kind of my thoughts after the first episode of this show, is that it's just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of exists. And that's something that I'm going to say about another thing here in a second. But yeah, I don't know. It definitely wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. I mean, I was ready for, like, you know, the next Bob Odenkirk thing with AMC. You know, I was ready, like yes, let's go after Better Call Saul. And this, I don't know, it didn't do it for me.
Well, and I guess that begs the question, like, why? Why is there no edge to it? Why does it, like, is it from the sounds of it, it's just too cynical without any heart? Like, there's just nothing to cheer for, nothing to, like, be anxious about as a viewer. It's just a guy running around having mundane interactions with people who are mad at him.
Yeah, well, it's that, and then it's also, I mean, like I had said before, it's very sitcom-y, and it's a mix of extremely, like, pedestrian humor, like, you know, I guess I would probably compare this to that ABC show Abbott Elementary, where, you know, it's set in the same sort of environment and stuff, and it's a mix of very pedestrian, like Big Bang Theory type humor,
but it's shot like Breaking Bad and Mad Men.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
exactly.
so weird.
It's very, very strange. And I don't know, I might give it another chance, you know, just to see kind of what it's all about. Because from what I understand, the book is pretty acclaimed. And, you know, people make a lot of comparisons. The book gets a lot of comparisons to Confederacy of Dunces. And so I'm like, is this really the show that you made out of this? And I guess we'll see. But
because the Confederacy of Dunces is famously unfilmable. It's one of those things that, you know, every major, like, comedian, male celebrity has, like, had on their wish list to do, and most of them died of speedballs, you know, of heroin and cocaine.
Yeah,
it's not even a joke. My God, but this you alluded to it though. Another thing that exists, that's just there, waiting for you to press play. The Boston Strangler. I almost did it. I saw Keira Knightley and I thought, hey, that can't be half bad. Surely. But it's bad, huh?
Well, it's not necessarily bad, but it just kind of is there. And this is Zodiac Light is what I'll call it.
Because those were the vibes I was getting. That's what gave me hope. You know, they tricked me.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's just kind of, again, this is another movie. This is about the Boston Strangler case from, I believe, the early 60s, where a guy killed 13 women, I believe. And the movie itself is about the two women reporters that sort of broke the case, it sort of connected the dots between all these murders. And I don't know, this movie just really plays like a series of events. Like, you know, there is really no through line. There is really no backstory given to any of the characters. There's no real character development done. Keira Knightley's character is just so boring, and it plays like a series of events. Like, we'll show you the first murder, then we'll show you the second murder, then we'll show you the third murder. And, you know, you see like every single one of these murders, but it's just kind of like it's almost like a documentary, but it's not. And they're really, they do try and inject the drama by fudging with the facts of this case, where they make Keira Knightley's relationship with the killer a lot more than it was in real life. Like, in real life, you know, I don't think she even ever met the killer, and he never was hunting her. But in the movie, they make it seem like the killer's like hunting her, and like, like, coming after her, and it's none of that happened. And so it's patently ridiculous, and yeah, it wasn't very good.
That's too bad, because that is what made, like, Zodiac so good, was how, like, because James Vanderbilt's script hewed very closely with the truth. Mm-hmm. And I guess it just had a subject that catered to that, because since as an unsolved case, the Zodiac is a lot more alluring because it's still a mystery. So like the more facts you get in there, the more horrifying and despair, inducing it is, the fact that person didn't get caught. But in this, like, why make it more spicy? Is it just because Dahmer had that person who literally knew what was going on and wasn't being heard, and they were just trying to emulate that angle, but they couldn't really pull it off because they had to fudge it so much? I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it too much.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, they really, they really focus on Keira Knightley's character, and we just don't know anything about her. I mean, that's
what I mean. Yeah, like
she's very, very one note in this movie. Her big sort of character trait is that her husband is mad with how much time she spends at work, and like that's her big character trait, and it's very one note.
Because at least in like Zodiac, you have Chloe Sevigny's character, like actually like acting like a human being, while her husband is in the middle of mania, over the mystery, and like the whole, like, and beyond just she's not just there to hector, she's there to be like, yo, motherfucker, like, we're not okay. Like, I'm not okay right now. This is not normal. Like at least there was something there for her to do. Even like look at, did you ever see God, what is it even called? It's the channel, the BBC Channel 4 series about the husband-wife murders from the UK that McNulty is in.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. It has David Thewlis in it, the guy from Harry Potter. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like really, really good. But at least in that one, like, the drama at home is, oh, my husband's schizophrenic and spent all of our money on a car, and now I have to, like, deal with some, like, real shit, and it all kind of gets driven home how crazy it is that she's had to sit there and get to know a monster. Like, I can't even remember their names. They're fucked up. Yeah. But see, that's more interesting to talk about than the Boston Strangler, which is the movie that we're kind of panning right now. But I did the unthinkable. The like what is the phrase from John Wick, the series itself? It's like, I was given the impossible task, and I watched all 3 of these movies in like 48 hours. Now it's 4 of these movies in like 48 hours. And I will simply say that back in the quaint year of 2016, when John Wick 1 came out, it just had this appeal because it was so absurd. The elevator pitch is, oh yeah, Keanu Reeves gets his house broken into, these Russian gangsters kill his dog, and then here it turns out he's like the greatest assassin of all time, and he goes on a glorious rampage of revenge, and that's the whole movie. Who's it directed by? Oh, just some stunt actor or coordinator that he's never made a movie before in his life. And I remember the reaction to John Wick being a lot of like, what the fuck? Like, why at the time? But then once the movie came out and we got it, people were like, okay, no, this rules. And because like it was coming off the heels of, obviously things like the Raid and the Raid 2 Burundal, like, which really, I think, kicked off this kind of movie in the 2010s. You got to give Gareth Evans credit. I think I got his name right. Isn't that his name, or is it Gareth Edwards?
The guy who did the Raid movies is Evans.
Evans. He also did The Apostle on Netflix, or just Apostle. But those 2 movies in specific just like were maximalist action movies that just had competent genre, cop gangster movie shenanigans slapped on top of it. the Raid 2 is basically just The Departed with punching and kicking in it, but it also had crazy action sequences and whatnot that pushed the limits of what you thought were possible in camera. And if there's anything that the John Wick trilogy, as I understood it, represented, it was that. It was that, like, even though it was all nonsense, like, I never really could tell you exactly who was what and what was who or why anything that was happening mattered. It all just looked good enough, and it was I could understand it enough, even if the words didn't make any sense, half the time, because it's all just, I don't know, like, maybe I'm underselling it, the mythology of this, because it is cool. This is basically 100 bullets for the common man, for the Bud Light crowd. This is, like it's 100 bullets, like, it's the movies for 100 bullets that we never got. It's the craziness of Smoking Aces with, like if Wanted had like its own assassin continuity still, like if it was its own franchise. But that's the beauty of John Wick. It was just some dumb name, and it was just Keanu Reeves, and with those foundational aspects, they have built what is probably the best action franchise of the new millennium. I guess I'll put my flag on that. There's nothing from superheroes, Star Wars, like anything that's like a crazy roller coaster ride experience, a blockbuster experience. I think the John Wick movies, like this initial trilogy, represented something significant and was worthy of the conversation. I'll let you do the intro to John Wick 4 because I kind of have basically done that myself here, but it kind of makes the case that my argument that it is the cream of the crop, as it were, that argument is the right one, because this movie is something else. Take it away.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on all that, because I'm gonna kind of continue to touch on some of those themes. John Wick series, probably one of the more surprising action series to actually take off. Because I still remember seeing the first trailer before 2013's Evil Dead film, and when the title came up on screen, people in the theater started laughing and snorting because it's ridiculous. And now that we're a decade removed, hundreds of millions of dollars later, the series is critically acclaimed, it is audience acclaimed, and it has reached its fourth and final film. We're a long way from people laughing at the movie's name. And I think that's probably the best place to start with John Wick Chapter 4. It is a complete commitment to the bit. It is a complete commitment to what it's selling. It doesn't matter how excessive it may seem. It doesn't matter how stupid its lore and setting sometimes seems. It doesn't matter how ridiculously survivable its protagonist is. Modern action films often feel embarrassed by their world and their lore, feeling the need to cram in as much comedy as possible and constantly winking at the audience. Look at the MCU. Look at the lead writer for Netflix's Witcher series coming out against the books that she's fucking adapting. Look at this new Dungeons and Dragons movie where they hired the directors of the comedy film Game Night to laugh and snicker their way all the way to the silver screen. None of it is taken seriously. And that is why John Wick succeeds. It is complete commitment. It is excessive. It is ridiculous. And you take it all incredibly seriously because the movie takes it seriously. And I loved this movie. I think it is the best one out of any of these. I think it is the most cinematic version of these movies. I think it has the best through line, the most satisfying ending, and I'm pretty much completely on board with everything it was doing. Couple nitpicks, I guess. We'll get to those, but yes, amazing.
I am so fucking inspired right now. Like, I think you said a lot that really needs to be said. Because why this movie succeeds is because it doesn't think that it's there to do anything else but to entertain you. Here is not a movie that is, taking your time. It's not robbing you of your life and your dollars so that it can hector you and lecture you about something. It's just here to show you some cool shit and have some awesome actors say some really silly lines in the coolest way possible, and to do things that you just shouldn't be able to fucking do. Like, we'll get into the nitty-gritty about all the different action sequences, but they do inspiring things. Like this movie, like you say, it's cinematic in that it reminds you of like what can be achieved, what can be possible if you open your third eye wide enough and then somehow find a way to replicate it on the silver screen for other people. Like, how do you become a wizard enough at punching somebody that you can make a movie like this? Like, as far as a director goes, is Chad Stahelski, I think I said his name right. How do you become this guy? Like, what do we know about him? Because that's what makes no sense to me. It's like the lore, all of that, like, is whatever. But then you take a dude who could actually make a product that is digestible. Like, how is that possible? Because we know how, like, Mark Millar is hard to swallow. There's a reason why we didn't get Wanted 2. Or even a version of Wanted that hewed to his comics. But it's like, yeah.
Yeah, Chad Stahelski is interesting because, you know, he started nearly like 30 years ago working in Hollywood as a stuntman. And he's part of this sort of new school of stuntmen who have become directors. Very, very similar career trajectory to David Leitch, the guy who did the Deadpool movies and Bullet Train. But I think he's much more successful because the thing about Chad Stahelski is there was a gradual incline for him where he went from stuntman to stunt coordinator to assistant director. He is the assistant director on many, many action films before he even touched John Wick. And then he got his break with John Wick 1, and he's done all 4 of these movies. And he has the eye for what makes a good action scene. He knows when to mix practical and CG in a good way. And then he brings all of his friends to the movie. He says, you know, all my stuntman friends, come do this movie. We're going to sell the hell out of this thing. And that's what he does.
God damn. Because that's the thing. It's half the fun, or half the reason to join his movies is the fun. Because you know it's going to be done safely, but you know it's going to be, hey, we know all the tricks and we know the realities a lot better than these silly, artsy-fartsy directors who go to their film schools. We went to the School of Hard Knocks, Mr. Stuntman. So yeah, like it's a neat little vibe, a little bit of a wave going on, the new stunt wave or something like that. I don't know. It's stupid. But as far as this movie goes, it's indicative of, like, this is like their crowning achievement, the apotheosis of everything that has been coalescing over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, I was, when this movie starts, I kind of folded my arms and was, saying like, okay, movie impressed me, because this movie literally starts with two Lawrence of Arabia references. You know, you have the desert scene on the horseback, and then you have the scene of Lawrence Fishburne blowing out the match that transitions into the setting or the rising sun. And so I was like, okay, are we really doing this? Are we really doing Lawrence of Arabia? And then the entire movie itself, I mean, I guess I'm kind of a mark for this stuff because a lot of this movie is just the good, the bad, and the ugly, where you have like gunfights and like standoffs and the musical cues. There's a musical cue in this movie towards the end that is literally like the opening notes of the last duel scene from For a Few Dollars More. And then the 3 main characters are all like direct analogs to the 3 main characters from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And so, yeah, I guess I'm just kind of a mark for it because I think it adapted those things very well, and I think it pays homage to them very well. And so by the end of the movie, of course I was fully on board, but yeah, it was an interesting way to start it off.
Because then it goes deeper than that, because the central 3 fighters of our story, the dudes dancing around each other for most of the movie, mirror the 3 main characters from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly directly too, as you've pointed out. But I guess what I didn't quite pick up on is like what do you mean by the beginning desert sequence as being a fuck you to the end of the third.
Yeah, so I can't help but notice that the writer for the first three John Wick films is not on board for this fourth one. It is the main writer, anyways, Derek Kolstad, I believe was his name. He, I don't know what happened, but he's not on this fourth movie. And I almost feel like, because the whole thing about the third movie is, John Wick has to please the Elder, who is basically the head of the High Table. And in the opening, 5 minutes of this movie, he just blows his head off. He blows that guy's head off. And so, yeah, it almost felt like a fuck you to the third movie. Like, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to take it in a completely different direction. And I don't know if that had to do with the absence of Kolstad or what, but that's what I felt. That's the feeling I got.
Because that is the thing. If you go on Google and you type in John Wick, there's a lot of images that say John Wick trilogy. Did they really think that they were going to make a fourth one when they ended that third one? Or was it just always in their back pocket, maybe?
I think so. I think they were going to always probably do a fourth, because around the time that John Wick 3 came out was also the time that, all this talk of the spin-offs, was kind of coming about. And so and then, I mean, of course, if you want to be real cynical about it, there's the whole money thing, because these movies have done nothing but ascend as far as the box office goes, and they're going to continue to do so with this fourth one. It's on track to do about 70 million this weekend, which is a franchise best. So of course they're going to make a fourth.
Does this mean that we're going to be, maybe this is a question better served for the end, but if this is successful, are we going to see less superhero movies going forward and more quote unquote original attempts at franchise building?
God, I hope so. I hope that would be sort of the lesson they would take away. But as successful as these movies are, they're still not as successful as superhero movies. Like, that's the thing, is this is on track to
cost nearly as much.
That is true. That is very true.
That's the key difference, I think.
Yeah, that is very true. Because but I mean, when you look at the box office, as being a success for this film means 70 million in a weekend, that would be considered a failure for a superhero movie, because a success for a superhero movie is 150 million first weekend. So unfortunately, I don't think that's what that means, okay. But I mean, we'll see.
We'll see. Well, what else? I guess we might as well get it out of the way. Did they really have to kill Lance Reddick's character so quickly in the movie that came out right after he died? Why did they do that?
Yeah, that was, oh man, that was rough. That was, I mean, you really can't, when you're watching those scenes, you can't help but think of, real life. And yeah, it was, I mean, this movie is a week removed from his death, so you obviously can't fault them for it, but it's yeah, it's pretty rough that his character just gets unexpectedly shot in this movie and then dies on the floor of some palatial, high-rise building, and then they show his grave later, and it's oh fuck, this is so rough.
Well, it puts that thing that we mentioned, when in our little memoriam segment for him in context, because on Keanu's birthday, his wife or fiance was where do you want to go? And he was I want to go see Lance. So that means when he went to the set to go on his day off to go see Lance Reddick, it was when they were shooting him getting killed.
Yeah, more than likely.
Yeah,
that is definitely probably the case. But yeah, I mean, again, rest in peace, because he, even in his, 5 minutes of screen time, he's great. That whole scene is very, very tense, and it was very well done with the sand and the hourglass, and him sort of speaking up against the Marquis, and then paying for it. That was very well done.
Yeah, and that just kind of points to something, I guess, a larger praise that we got to give the whole thing that you highlighted in the document: the set design, the art direction. anytime that they had to be in a space, it looked amazing. I can only imagine how complicated it was to build out that abandoned apartment during that shootout sequence at the end that they were, hovering the camera over and flying around. Like, they did impossible tasks, but they made it all look so real, even when they blended in shit that was obviously fake. Like that, and that. How do you make that wrong way around the roundabout chase gunfight sequence work in a real world, in a real Paris? Because they made it look so real. It did not look fake to me. It was like they were just shooting this thing French Connection style on the streets of Paris without a permit, and we're just waiting to get arrested, but the cops never showed up.
Yeah, no, that is probably the highlight action scene of the film, is that one. And they haven't come out yet. I'm sure we'll eventually get some sort of behind the scenes of, how that scene was filmed, but they haven't come out yet and said. But my only guess is that they shot some of it on location, and then for some of it, they built like a recreation of that street. I mean, obviously they didn't build a whole Arc de Triomphe, but there are parts in that scene where you can sort of tell. It never got to the point where it bothered me, but you can tell that somebody clearly didn't actually get hit by a car. Like, it was CG, like the body that was flying in the air was obviously CG. And so I'm guessing it was a combination of on location shooting, and then they built a recreation. They built a set version of that street, of that roundabout, and then did some green screening and then kind of called it a day. But yeah, that's if you wanted to get into the action scenes, and start with that one. I mean, that's the one to start with, because a good action film is only as good as its set pieces. It's only as good as its action scenes. And yeah, that was great. I mean, just all the people getting hit by the cars and sort of dodging and weaving through traffic and just kind of sidestepping to not get hit by a car and have, the guy he's fighting against get hit, and just incredible.
The one sequence that I just I lost my fucking head was when there's 3 cars that are all stopped, they're clustered together, and all those guys are out and they have their guns raised, and then John Wick just starts ghost riding the whip around them, whipping a cookie and shooting them dead eye shooting them with his unsupported hand from his car. They should be covering him with bullets and just destroying him, but he is able to just shoot nonstop without reloading for way more than 21 shots. But I just turned my brain off, and I was like, this is just awesome, man. Just enjoy it. Just let it happen. Even if because it beggars belief half the time, but at the same time, there is a lot of grounded realism in the combat when they want it to be. And I really liked the fight up the stairs. That whole final act is so killer. Where they set that all up to okay, yeah, we're gonna have a duel. We're gonna pistols at dawn. That's cool, but you gotta actually make it here. And once I realized what was happening, I was like, oh, thank God, because it wasn't a slog, because from action set piece to the next, it didn't start feeling final boss video gamey until that moment. But at that moment, I was just utterly into it, and it was just enjoying the absurdity of the fact that Keanu Reeves wasn't a pile of broken bones yet, and he was still out there pummeling motherfuckers. I mean, we're not going to see movies like this anymore. Liam Neeson used to make these movies too, not quite to this extreme. He made them the CBS version of whatever the John Wick movies are.
Yeah, those, I mean, that fight up the stairs, incredible. I really liked how they intercut that radio DJ where she would kind of follow them from location to location, and she was sort of the decider of the soundtrack while those fight scenes were going on.
And because the car radios, that music would get diegetic within the scenes because the assassins are listening to it. And then he has hijacked that vehicle or crashed it or something, and the music will fade in and out and distort. Yeah, it gave the whole. It was basically like you had a full John Wick movie, and then for the final act, they were like, "Oh yeah, here's our version of the Warriors."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was incredible. And my personal favorite action scene of the movie was that Berlin nightclub because it was so well done. I really enjoyed that side villain that they brought in, Killa, the big fat guy. That was awesome, and how he just pummeled John Wick and like threw him off the ledge of that nightclub, and the waterfalls and just all of the people dancing. And I thought that it reminds me of like the Matrix action scenes, the Matrix Reloaded, when they go into the club.
Yeah.
Killa, I mean, that guy is amazing. That's such a good idea for a character this far into this film series, where we've seen kind of almost every iteration of bad guys possible, and then you introduce this big like fat German that's played by do you know who Scott Adkins is?
Yeah, he's a big thick muscle daddy as far as I can remember.
So they fatten him up a bunch, and another one of Stahelski's stuntman friends, and yeah, that action scene, that whole thing was awesome, and just how he at the end of it, he falls off, or he launches him over the ledge and just breaks his neck on that staircase. And
so good.
Yeah, very, very good. And what did you think of? I think probably the weakest set piece of the film is probably, I mean, it's still good, but the Osaka Continental fight, because I felt like it went on for a long time, and it was probably the least interesting of all of the. There were parts of it that were cool, like Donnie Yen's motion activated doorbells, and that was pretty interesting. But on a whole, that was probably the least interesting.
It basically is there for a purpose, made evident by the after credit sequence, I believe, because they just needed something to set something up within the movie, but also do some very effective franchise building at the same time. And I think that's why you'll blame it for being a little uninspired compared to the other ones, because they kind of just needed to be basic about it, because they needed to make sure that one character made it out alive. I won't say which one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of times with these films, you don't see the seams in the fight scenes very much, and that was one of the scenes where I felt like I saw the seams, where you could kind of tell that that Keanu Reeves was either very old, which he is, he's an old guy now, or he was very tired when he was doing all that nunchuck stuff.
Oh god, that was kind of corny. Yeah,
that was a little corny, and a lot of it looked a little iffy, and like he wasn't connecting with the guys he was fighting. And also one of the things that you sort of notice with these martial arts heavy movies is the background stuntmen doing what I would like to call the stuntman shuffle, where they're waiting for their moment to get hit. They're waiting for their moment to get punched by Keanu Reeves, and they're just kind of standing in the background going like this. And they're waiting for their moment. And you notice it a lot in that scene, where it's like, okay, that guy clearly could have punched Keanu Reeves in the back of the head at that moment, but he was waiting for him to turn around and punch him. And so you don't see that with this series very often, but I felt like I saw it a lot there.
Yeah, some of those action sequences that are a little bit more prolonged, as those takes get longer, you do see like Keanu has a bit of a hitch in his step. The nunchucks for some reason just get like nonchalantly laid across his neck over his shoulders so that he can crack the neck of the guy he's stolen the gun from. Like things just take a little too long, but they don't want to ramp it up and make it look uncanny, because then the people will know that it's fake. You know what I mean? A little more. You got to keep the pretense up, but they didn't. Yeah, they got to be able to cover the seams up a little bit better sometimes. But yeah, like that shot of those bodies flying in the air. I want to shout out that dog. That dog is the most Chad fucking dog in a movie ever. The fact that they trained it to piss on command, to make this movie is like I just appreciated everything that dog had to do. But I also want to bring up the character called Klaus. And because this person is introduced, basically it's like, okay, you've come to us, John Wick, we tell you to fuck off, John Wick, we the Roma, we don't like you, now we're just gonna hand you over to the bad guy, okay, Klaus, go take him. So this guy shows up and he's covered with tattoos. I wish I couldn't find a picture of him for some reason.
He looks like oh god, what is that guy's, the old guy from Billy Connolly, the old guy from Boondock Saints. Yeah, that's what he looks like.
But, God, basically, my thought on that character, though, because there's just a lot of characters like that just like worm into your head, like the Gimp in Pulp Fiction, where you're given nothing, but your brain just has to fill in the gap somehow, and there's this deep backstory that must exist, like. It's kind of like an iceberg, I guess is what the modern internet would call it. And Klaus is an iceberg character because he's inexplicable, he's absurd, and you're just like, what the fuck? Like, well, why is this person here? He's just like, I am Klaus, and now I leave. And then he's there and he's gone. He never comes up again. He doesn't show up at the end to save John Wick's life or some shit like that. He is just there. And for some reason, he's given a name. And, that's just the way it goes. And we just have to live with it. We'll never stop thinking about you, Klaus.
Well, speaking of the characters that are introduced in this film in particular, another thing it's so good at doing is, this is ostensibly the final 3 hours of this quadrilogy, and they introduce so many new characters in sort of the 11th hour, and usually when film series do that, it's so badly done. There he is. And I just want to commend them for, the three, main characters that are introduced in this movie, and they're in this movie alone, are Bill Skarsgård, Shamir Anderson's tracker character, and then Donnie Yen's Kane. And they sort of introduce and make these characters a part of this film in such a meaningful way. It's so well done, I thought.
Everyone's motivations made sense. And it didn't matter that we didn't have any prior context with them. Within the context of the John Wick universe, you just by looking at them, you knew exactly, basically who they were. There's a kind of like a silent film quality to like the storytelling in these movies that is just kind of like primal to cinema in a way that I guess that's the strongest suit behind all of this, is that they don't need people to talk to convey exactly what's going on before they start punching. And it's not too often you see that, because Mark Millar would just fill it with nothing but dialogue, like he was Quentin Tarantino. Compare this to something like Kick-Ass, or because that's another movie. It's in the lineage. Wanted, Kick-Ass, it did lay the foundation for what John Wick would do. I'm just a lot more satisfied with what these people are able to achieve, I guess.
Same.
It's grown into something beautiful.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And I wanted to touch on the lore of John Wick, because now that we have these 4 movies and these announced spin-offs for this world, what do you think about the lore? I mean, as far as this just strange mix of Latin and French and Russian Orthodox imagery, and then you have all these weird disparate elements, these women that are 1950s telephone operators, and these hotels for hitmen that are all over the world, and it's all very strange. And at this point, what do you think of it all? Do you think is it too dumb to work, or is it just dumb enough that it does work?
I think that's exactly it. Because yeah, it's esoteric, but like in the middle of the John Wick 2, I was like, God, this is stupid. I don't care about this. I always have the Roger Ebert quote of, as far as I could understand, I did not care. But then John Wick 3 came along, and for some reason, like, it started clicking for me what I was seeing. As I've alluded to, it's like this is just 100 bullets. Like, this is just like, look at it from that perspective, because it's the elites, it's the killers who are forced into bondage to them, and it's the war to decide, like, who gets to exist, who gets to have the power in behind, like, for the people who are the power behind the power. And once I like processed it that way, I was totally fine with it. I stopped like overthinking it, because I don't know, but that's just my personal way of processing this. I could like see like other people having their eyes just glaze over and not care, but I care. It works for me now, and I would not mind seeing more. I'm not sad that John Wick is dead. They better not raise that corpse from the dead anytime soon. But at the same time, I would be down to see other characters. I would love to see the world maybe continue if they have cool ideas for it, because they're not doing anything ponderous. They don't need to pull off we need to have a Thanos level event every 4 movies type of bullshit. Yeah. Like, they just need to make a good one. There's got to make another good one, I guess, but that's what's on the horizon. They're going to be doing some spin-offs.
Yeah, there's, as of right now, I believe 3 announced spin-offs. The Ballerina series from that's going to star Ana de Armas, which, I mean, there's already a poster out for it, so I mean, it's a thing. It's coming. And the one thing I will say is I believe it is a prequel. I mean, it has to be a prequel because it has been announced that Keanu Reeves is going to be in it. At least he'll probably make a cameo. That's honestly probably all it will be. But and then of course we have the Continental, which is going to be a TV series about the hotel. And then also, I would assume, I guess I shouldn't have said that these were all announced, because you would assume that they're going to do something with that end credit scene of this film, because what happens basically is the Hiroyuki Sanada's daughter from the Japanese Continental is about to get revenge on Donnie Yen's character, Donnie Yen's Kane, and then it sort of cuts out. And so, they must be doing something with that, I would assume. Yeah.
That was my thought. That's what I was alluding to, because you don't go out of your way to have an after credit sequence unless you're setting something up. Like, there are not too many movies that have done that. I forget who. Yeah, because like even like the pioneer of the after credit sequence, as far as I know, was Pirates of the Caribbean, and that was because they thought they were going to maybe do other ones.
Yeah, that I think they were definitely among one of the first, major blockbusters to do it, and yeah, so it'll be interesting to see kind of how this sort of pans out. I mean, like I said earlier, this movie is going to do gangbusters, and Chad Stahelski is about to become one of the most sought-after directors in Hollywood. He already is. If you go to his IMDb page, he has 14 in-development projects right now, and including a adaptation of the Sony PlayStation game Ghost of Tsushima and Rainbow Six movie.
See, I am fucking excited for that, dude, because if it's anything like the book, like, it's probably gonna, I don't know, it might be more closely associated with the games, because in the book the bad guys are eco-terrorists that are trying to spread Ebola at the Sydney Olympics so that all of humanity will die except for their little pocket utopia in the Amazon. And the end of that story is John Clark showing up with Rainbow Six and taking all the bad guys out of the jungle, making them strip naked, and then like walk into it so that they could like get killed by the elements. I don't think they're gonna make that, but that book is awesome. There's like have you ever read it?
No, I've heard it's awesome. I have played some of the games. I played the I put so many hours into Rainbow Six Vegas, the Xbox 360 game, but yeah, that could be cool because yeah, I've heard that the books hew closer to, you know, political thrillers as many Tom Clancy adaptations do.
That said, like the actual like operator sequences that, you know, that are in there, one of them takes place at like Disneyland Europe. You know, it involves Carlos the Jackal, like terrorists trying to get him free. If you, God, I can't bring, yeah, because if you haven't read the books Jason Bourne, it makes no sense because he's not in the movies. But there's a whole bunch of really good ones, like, and then, but the highlight is that one at the Disney World though, because there's a sniper that does something really badass in it. God, but what I was gonna bring up though, I guess, does this movie make the case for? Oh yes, you have it in there too, I guess, and he's directly lobbying it. I didn't see that you actually had notes in there.
Yep,
my mind was going in the same direction. Does this man deserve the inaugural best like stunts Oscar award, or like does this movie? Are they going to create it just for this movie, or is this movie going to be the reason why they create the category?
Yeah, you know, I hate to say it, but I don't think there's going to be much movement on that front. I don't think, you know, within a year, within 5 years, I don't think it's actually going to happen. But I mean, if people don't know, in the sort of press tour for this film, Stahelski has been devoting a lot of time to lobbying for a Best Stunts Academy Award category. And I don't know. I just don't. I think they're too stuffy to acknowledge something like that. You know, as cool as it could be, because what do you think if that, you know, hypothetically, if that were to be a thing, what do you think would go into looking at something like that? Like, what would go into searching for the best stunts?
And at what point would the like layman Academy voter be involved in the decision, you know, in the vote? Because this seems like the kind of thing that you would want the insiders within that discipline to have the most voice in, because they're the only ones who really understand what a good stunt is. Because you could see some things, like someone would probably say that, oh, Avatar had the best stunts, when 99% of that movie would be completely painted with pixels. What is actual and they probably did have some, like, they had to do some like in-camera stunt work to be sure, but what is more worth, you know, while of achieving what's more deserving? And honestly, I would think it would be the thing that was done in camera with the least amount of like After Effects processing, or had enough like in-camera work that, you know, it's indisputable that like someone actually did a thing. I know Wire Fu is a part of it, so like having elegance to that and being able to hide it while, you know, using it effectively is important. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that could go into it, but yeah, I would assume that mostly it would go to, you know, things that you know took real human bodies to achieve, more than sitting in front of a computer.
Yeah, same. I mean, it would. I think what would go into it is searching for, you know, the movies that have the most unique stunt set pieces, while making it look real, but without actually like hurting people, you know, or like making something look realistic without actually like killing or hurting people.
Yeah.
And I assume what would kind of go into the,
if someone dies and you're in production, you're disqualified.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but you know, the thing with the Academy Awards is, if that were to ever be invented, if they ever were to include that category, unfortunately, I think that they would mostly stick to like major action blockbusters, as the Academy kind of does. You know, that's the thing about the Academy, is they hew very closely to the same movies, where they're like, these are the same 20 movies that are going to get nominated for every category this year, and we're not going to look anywhere beyond that. And if you were to introduce a best stunts category, I think that for the most part, most years it would probably go to some Thai movie that nobody's ever heard of, or some Chinese movie that, you know, nobody, or some Taiwanese movie that nobody's ever heard of. But the Academy voters aren't branching out into those areas. So they're just going to nominate some, action blockbuster that, that they thought was cool looking or something like that.
Yeah, unless you're a movie like RRR that for some reason had a lot of, like international appeal, you wouldn't get notice more than likely. Because that movie probably deserved some kind of stunt nomination if it existed, even though they probably had a lot of, a lot of help in post-production too, all the same. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that dude is going to be making a lot of money. I just hope that he doesn't, fuck around too much and find out someday, do something stupid, and then have his whole career taken away from him. God, like there's a lot of news items we just did not have room for this week. A lot of people have been losing their jobs, or maybe shouldn't have lost their jobs to begin with. There's a lot of those conversations going on. But John Wick for Chapter 4, a conclusion and the best kind of movie, the one that I can enjoy completely, even though I did not want it, did not care for it, did not ask for it. It's kind of like when I went to see Mad Max Fury Road for the first time, and I was like, why am I going to this? And then I walked out of the theater and said, this is the best movie I'll see all year long. And I was right about that, but just gobsmacked. I'm gobsmacked by this movie. I'm pleased that it kept on giving you something more as it escalated to its final moments, and it was completely satisfying. Like, this is like what if Hideo Kojima actually got to make the final Metal Gear Solid game he always wanted to make. There was no one in the way of this thing, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, same.
But that kind of does it for the main review. Now we're gonna head on over to the mentionables. How long did you have to wait in queue to get into the hottest beta in town, the Diablo IV Beta?
Yeah, so I played this last weekend, and the initial queue time that I had was 100 minutes just to get into the game. And so I just kind of let my computer idle and went and did something else. But then I came back and I played the Diablo IV Beta, and let me tell you, this is a pretty good game so far. It's very polished for a beta. And it seems like the creators are actually listening to the fan wants and concerns, where they have made this more darker. It hews closer to Diablo 2 rather than Diablo 3, where there's a direness to the world again. Everything is very grim dark and very, lots of grays instead of... Diablo 3 was too colorful, and there was the art style was way off, and they went completely off base. And this is back to sort of that grim dark art style of Diablo 2, and it's very fun. Really, really like the gameplay so far. It's very addicting. The one thing I will say, buyer beware as far as when the actual game comes out in June. They have not yet introduced any of the pay elements, and we don't know what those are going to be to their full extent so far. So they could introduce a really, really shitty cash store where you're paying, microtransaction laden store. We don't know that yet. So, beware of that. Don't go out and pre-order now. Wait till we know these things. And the beta is the public beta is this weekend. It's going on right now, so you can actually go on Battle.net right now and download the Diablo IV beta and play it. I believe it goes till Monday morning. So highly recommend doing that.
I may have to do that if I can find the time here, because I have been pretty consumed in my own way by a recent purchase I made that I've hinted at and told the world about. But yeah, it's a SteamDeck, and I could probably play this on this. These little devices are the future, I guess. That's my mentionable for the week, because anything that I could take anywhere with me and play Cyberpunk 2077 or The Binding of Isaac or Diablo 4, Hades, Peggle, I can fucking boot up Space Cadet Pinball like it's like Windows 3.1
Yes.
on this thing. You know, like it's a crazy device, and I feel like once people actually understand what they are, they're going to become a little bit more ubiquitous, this kind of device. When Valve announced these things, speaking about like being cautious as an early adopter, I was really cautious about this thing because I almost spent like $650 to like reserve one of these things, like when there was a waiting list for them, and I almost bought one last fall, but I hesitated because I just wasn't sure, like, if it was actually going to live up to the promise, and I wanted to let the market test it a bit before they got one in my hands. And it was good that I did that, because there's things like certain manufacturing issues with the fan that they use for cooling, because the early generations of the SteamDeck had, like they've now changed the part that they use for that reason, because it could cause catastrophic failure or it was just too dang noisy. It's just as an example. But the best reason to not be an early adopter on hardware like this is to let the software catch up. Because if you have been paying attention to the Mentionables, we often mention free game giveaways. Because if you have an Epic Games account, you probably have access to a free game or two every week to just bloat your library. And there is a seamless and easy way to get all of those games and games on good old games on GOG. You can easily just get those onto your Steam Deck without any headache. But you can also do all the really nitty-gritty shit, like getting Xbox Game Pass on there. You can even like plug in an external floppy drive and install a game from 1992 on there if you are a masochist. But the appeal is that out of the box, without even knowing an ounce of Linux, you can do so much with this thing. And it's for a price that you can't even get a decent office laptop. Forget a gaming laptop. With gaming, hardware as expensive as it is these days, forget ever being able to afford to build your own gaming computer again. Just get one of these fucking things. You can upgrade the memory, whether it's the solid state drive on the inside with by taking it to a shop or cracking it open yourself if you're insane. I'm not that insane. But from what I understand, Valve is pretty easy to work with. If you fuck up and break these things, you might pay a couple $100, but they'll diagnose the problem and fix it and give you back your original device. The only time that they actually pull an Apple and a Samsung and force you to get an entirely new one is if you're it got ran over by a car, and there's no way to just swap a screen out and get the thing going again. This is the future. I'm hugely enthusiastic about this. You can do retro gaming, with the snap of a finger, and your Steam Deck can live on it. You can use streaming gaming services like Nvidia's or Amazon's Luna, Xbox Game Pass for $15 a month. I think you can just do cloud gaming through there on here without having to partition Windows or any of that shit. So that's
emulators too.
Yeah, emulators, dude. Yeah, I could play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 on the GameCube, and it looks great. Emulators on my PC always look janky, but because of the form factor, because it doesn't have the craziest resolution to its screens, a lot of emulation looks really, really good on this. I've seen PlayStation 3, get emulated on it. People were playing Metal Gear Solid 4, which is a game I've always wanted to play, and now I probably can, which is, kind of fun, because I don't have a PlayStation 3, and I don't have that game on hand. And it's not like they're ever going to be able to emulate it any other way. But yeah, I recommend getting this for yourself, or putting it on your Christmas list, because the day that I bought this fucking thing, Valve rolled out their spring sale and dropped the price on it. And instead of giving me the discount, they just gave me store credit. So I bought Sekiro and I bought Hades so that I could have it on there, and a few other games. But I have a rule that I'm going to be hewing to, which is that if I install a game on it, I have to beat it if I've never beaten it before. because otherwise I'm just gonna play the game of I wonder what this is like, and I'll never actually do anything but just install and uninstall games. But yeah.
I've been very, just to cap it off, I've been very tempted to get one because, I mean, essentially, from what I can tell, these things are a more powerful Nintendo Switch with the games that you actually want to play. That's what. And man, that I have a Switch, and that thing is really starting to show its age. And I've heard that that these are pretty fantastic. These Steam Decks.
Because that's the thing. Like you can be a power user and get as much as you can out of a Switch, and as you would out of a PC. And Valve really was onto something when they realized, this is what we should be fucking doing, instead of making those consoles that they were trying to make, those Steam machines, or even VR. VR never really felt like the thing to me, but this does. I could realistically take my Steam Deck to the lake with me and just bring my dock and my cameras and my microphone, and I could stream off my hotspot at the lake. Realistic. It's not really realistic, but it's something that could maybe happen. Because this it's a computer, and and let me tell you, I've never experienced Linux before. It's actually really nice. It's really zippy, and it's really intuitive too. And the Steam Deck as a computer, because you can switch between desktop mode and the Steam Deck mode basically. But the desktop mode, really, really fucking cool. You can, I could work. I could just pull up Google Chrome on it, and I could plug in a keyboard, and I could work from home from that instead of a workstation. So it has a lot of appeal. But what was your pick of the week? I have lost I accidentally got rid of a lot of our old graphics, so I don't have a pick of the week graphic. But what was your pick of the week for episode 1 of Theater and Stream, Matt?
Yeah, that's okay, because my pick of the week, you just put it up on the screen. John Wick Chapter 4. I'll use my the last couple moments here to sort of reiterate with this film that it really is the most narratively successful film of these 4 films, where a lot of times the older versions, the 1 through 3, they feel like a reason to string together action scenes, and the plot is kind of meh. But this film really does have a great through line, and by the end of the film, when it gets to that final the final duel scene, you really are invested in the stakes. You really are wanting to know what's going to happen. And he does such a good job of stringing it out. I mean, that final duel scene is up there with the best scenes like it from, the old Sergio Leone Westerns. It's right up there with those. And so go see this while it's still in theaters. Don't wait till it's on streaming. Don't wait till it's on your phone.
No.
Go see it now.
Yeah, as far as that goes, this is one of those movies that Christopher Nolan is right about. It needs to be seen on the silver screen. Unfortunately, it won't ever be seen on celluloid, but get as close as possible to a maximalist version of the experience that serves the intentions of the people who made it. We're not going to see anything else like this year, probably. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But as far as the legacies of westerns, anti-heroes, and action, like martial arts movies go, this is the blender fusion of all time, and it works in every respect when it maybe shouldn't. No matter how silly, no matter how gratuitous and excessive, it always finds a way to give you more, and that's why you should see it. It is also my pick. And with that, we'll say thank you. This is Theater and Stream. That is Matt Miller. I am Chuck Crane. You'll be able to find us, of course, on YouTube here and on various streaming platforms, beginning with Amazon, Spotify, and eventually, once we get all our ducks in a row, on iTunes and even Google's podcast platform. But look ahead to that. Check us out on the social media links that we'll be including below, and have yourself a good week and watch some good movies.
one more thing. We also should have mentioned this earlier probably, but we are going to begin uploading our episodes on Monday nights. So you are actually probably seeing this on a Monday night if you're watching it. And so get used to that, I guess, going forward. I think it's just going to work better for us as far as getting eyes on our videos, and also just for the people watching it, because the thing is, nobody really wants to watch a movie review podcast on the morning of their day off, on the morning of their first day off, their weekend. So we're kind of acknowledging that fact. And so, yeah, Monday nights going forward.
Yeah, because the fact of the matter is, all you people are, nursing hangovers or, are doing other things. You're playing Frolf or, doing cross-country skiing. It's a Saturday morning. Having brunch, so yeah, we are going to shift things up a little bit, and in the future, if we get enough of an interest for it, we may do a live streaming component, at some point. But we'll let you guys, come before we build it, in that way. But anyways, take care and have a good week.
Yep. See ya.